The aroma of burnt garlic filled my kitchen as smoke poured from the oven. Again. I yanked open the door and pulled out what was supposed to be my mother-in-law's famous enchilada casserole, now resembling charcoal more than dinner. The timer had been set correctly, the temperature was right, but somehow I'd managed to transform a family recipe into a disaster. As I stared at the smoking mess, my phone buzzed with a text from Patricia Martinez, my mother-in-law. "Looking forward to tasting your cooking tonight, Misha. I'm sure you'll make the family proud this time." This time. Those two words carried the weight of 12 years of marriage, 12 years of failed dinner parties, ruined holiday meals, and the constant reminder that I was somehow failing as a wife because I couldn't master what seemed to come naturally to every other woman in the Martinez family. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Jessica Martinez, and for the past 12 years, I've been living a lie. Not the kind of lie you might expect involving secret affairs or hidden debts, but something more insidious. Something that ate away at my confidence one burned meal at a time. I married into a family where a woman's worth was measured by her ability to create magic in the kitchen, and I couldn't even make toast without setting off the smoke alarm. Growing up in Phoenix as Jessica Thompson, I was the girl who excelled at everything academic. Valedictorian of my high school class, marketing degree from Arizona State University with honors, fast-tracked at a prestigious advertising firm downtown. I could craft campaigns that moved millions of dollars in revenue, negotiate contracts that left seasoned executives impressed, and present to boardrooms full of intimidating clients without breaking a sweat. But put me in front of a stove, and I became a fumbling disaster. My mother, Carol Thompson, worked 60-hour weeks as a pediatric nurse and taught me survival cooking. Microwave meals, takeout menus organized by delivery speed, and the fine art of making reservations. She never apologized for it, and I never felt deprived. We bonded over late-night conversations about my dreams and ambitions, not over perfectly kneaded dough or simmering sauces. Everything changed when I met David Martinez at a charity fundraiser in downtown Phoenix. He was magnetic in the way that successful men often are, confident without being arrogant, charming without being fake. His family's construction company, Martinez Brothers Development, had built half of Scottsdale's most exclusive neighborhoods. When he asked me to dance that night, his hand warm against my lower back, I felt like I'd found my missing piece. Our courtship was whirlwind romance at its finest. David would pick me up in his pristine black truck after my long days at the advertising agency, and we'd drive through the desert as the sun painted the mountains in shades of gold and crimson. He told me stories about growing up in a house where his grandmother's tamales were legendary, where Sunday dinners brought together 3 generations around a table groaning under the weight of homemade specialties. "You'll love my family," he promised one evening as we shared takeout Thai food on my apartment balcony. "They're going to adore you. Mom's already planning to teach you her secret recipes." I laughed, twirling pad thai around my chopsticks. "I should probably warn you, I'm not exactly what you'd call domestic. My idea of cooking is reading Yelp reviews." David's smile was indulgent, the kind men give when they think women are being modest. "That's what makes you perfect. You're independent, successful, driven. Mom will enjoy having someone new to spoil with her cooking lessons." I should have paid more attention to the assumption buried in his words. The idea that I would naturally want to learn, that I would seamlessly transition from career woman to family cook, that this was simply the evolution of our relationship, rather than a fundamental change in my identity. Our first family dinner should have been a warning. David's childhood home in Central Phoenix was a sprawling ranch-style house that his grandfather had built in the 1960s. Every surface told a story of family history. Hand-painted tiles from Mexico adorned the kitchen backsplash. Family photos spanning 4 generations covered the hallway walls, and the dining room table had been carved by David's great-uncle. Patricia Martinez, David's mother, was a force of nature wrapped in an apron. She moved through her kitchen with the grace of a dancer, somehow managing 6 different dishes simultaneously while maintaining perfect lipstick and not a hair out of place. The aromas that filled the house were intoxicating layers of cumin, cilantro, slow-cooked beef, and fresh tortillas that made my stomach growl with anticipation. "Jessica, mija, come here," she called, wiping her hands on a towel embroidered with colorful birds. "Let me show you how we make the mole sauce. It's been in our family for 4 generations." I stood beside her at the massive stone, watching her hands move with practiced efficiency. Dried chilies were being toasted in a cast-iron skillet, filling the kitchen with smoky complexity. She measured spices not with cups or teaspoons, but with the palm of her hand and decades of muscle memory. "The secret," she whispered conspiratorially, "is patience. American women always want to rush, but good mole takes all day, sometimes 2 days. You toast each chile until it's just right, never burned but deep and smoky. Then you grind everything by hand in the molcajete, like this." She demonstrated with the volcanic stone mortar and pestle that looked ancient and well-loved. Her movements were rhythmic, almost meditative, transforming whole spices into aromatic powder. I tried to memorize every step, but the process seemed impossibly complex, like trying to learn a symphony by watching someone play it once. "When you and David get married," Patricia continued, not looking up from her grinding, "I'll give you my molcajete. It belonged to my grandmother, every Martinez. Wife has used it." The weight of tradition settled on my shoulders like a heavy blanket. This wasn't just about learning to cook. This was about stepping into a role that had been defined by generations of women before me. Women who found joy and identity in feeding their families, who measured love in perfectly seasoned rice and tender carnitas. David's sister Rebecca arrived with her 3 children just as Patricia was putting the finishing touches on dinner. Rebecca moved through the kitchen like a smaller version of her mother, automatically setting the table, stirring pots, and correcting her children's behavior without missing a beat. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. She had the same easy confidence in the kitchen that I envied, the kind of natural ability that made cooking look effortless. "Jessica," she said, giving me a warm hug. "I'm so excited David found someone. Mom's been praying for this for years." Dinner was a revelation. 7 different dishes crowded the table, each one more complex and delicious than anything I'd ever tasted. The mole sauce Patricia had been preparing was glossy and dark, with layers of flavor that revealed themselves. With each bite, handmade tortillas were still warm from the comal, tender and slightly charred in just the right places. Spanish rice was perfectly seasoned, each grain distinct and flavorful. "Everything is incredible," I told Patricia honestly, helping myself to seconds of the chile rellenos. "I've never tasted anything like this." She beamed with pride, reaching over to pat my hand. "Wait until you learn to make it yourself, mija. There's nothing more satisfying than feeding the people you love with your own hands." David's father, Roberto, raised his beer in a toast. "To Jessica for making our David so happy. Welcome to the family." As everyone clinked glasses and smiled at me with such genuine warmth, I felt a stab of panic. They were all so sure I would seamlessly fit into this world of family recipes and Sunday dinners. They assumed I would want to spend my weekends learning to make masa from scratch and my evenings perfecting the art of properly seasoned beans. After dinner, as the women cleared the table, Rebecca linked her arm through mine. "Mom taught me everything I know about cooking when I got married. She's an amazing teacher. You're so lucky." "I should probably mention," I said carefully, "I'm not really much of a cook. I mean, I can barely manage scrambled eggs without burning them." Rebecca laughed, the kind of laugh that suggested she thought I was being modest. That's what we all say in the beginning. Trust me, after a few lessons with Mom, you'll be making tamales like a pro. It's in the Martinez blood now. But it wasn't in my blood, and that became painfully obvious over the next several months. Patricia invited me over every Saturday for cooking lessons, approaching my education with the enthusiasm of a missionary. She started with what she considered the basics: perfect rice, refried beans from scratch, and flour tortillas that were supposed to puff up like little pillows. My rice came out mushy or crunchy, never the fluffy perfection that Patricia achieved. Effortlessly. My beans either burned to the bottom of the pot or remained stubbornly hard despite hours of cooking. My tortillas looked like abstract art projects, misshapen and tough enough to use as frisbees. "It's okay, mija," Patricia would say patiently, scraping my latest disaster into the garbage disposal. "Cooking is like love. It takes practice and patience. We'll try again next week." But next week brought new disasters, and the week after, that brought more. David tried to be supportive, eating my failed attempts with encouraging smiles and reassuring words. "It just takes time, babe. You'll get it." The real test came 6 months later when David proposed. We were hiking Camelback Mountain at sunset, the city of Phoenix spread out below us like a glittering circuit board. When he dropped to one knee and pulled out the ring, a beautiful solitaire that caught the last rays of sunlight, I felt my heart soar. "Jessica Thompson, will you marry me and become part of our crazy, loud, food-obsessed family?" I said yes without hesitation, kissing him as the sky turned from gold to deep purple. In that moment, surrounded by the beauty of the desert and the man I loved, I felt like anything was possible. Even learning to cook. The engagement party was held at Patricia's house, naturally, with an elaborate spread that showcased 4 generations of family recipes. Extended family members came from all over Arizona and New Mexico, filling the house with rapid-fire Spanish conversations and the laughter of children running through the rooms. "Let me introduce you to everyone," David said, leading me through the crowd. Each introduction came with the same refrain. "This is Jessica. She's going to learn all of Mom's recipes. She's so lucky." David's grandmother, Abuela Rosa, took my hands in her weathered ones and studied my face with sharp eyes. "Mija, are you ready to feed this family? A Martinez man needs a wife who can cook with love." I nodded, trying to project confidence I didn't feel. "Patricia is teaching me everything." Abuela Rosa smiled and patted my cheek. "Good, good. The kitchen is the heart of the home. When you cook with love, you feed the soul, not just the belly." As the evening progressed, I found myself in conversations that all seemed to center around food. The women shared stories of family recipes passed down through generations, disasters that became family legends, and the joy of watching their children and grandchildren enjoy meals made with their own hands. "My mother-in-law taught me to make her pozole recipe," shared David's cousin Maria. "It took me 3 years to get it right, but now it's my signature dish. What's Patricia teaching you first?" "We're working on the basics," I said vaguely, not wanting to admit that I was still struggling with rice after 6 months of lessons. "Oh, the basics are so important," agreed David's Aunt Carmen. "Once you master those, everything else comes naturally." I still remember the first time I made mole that actually tasted like my mother's. I cried with happiness. These women spoke about cooking the way I talked about successful marketing campaigns. With passion, pride, and a deep sense of accomplishment. They found identity and joy in their ability to nourish their families, and I couldn't understand how something that felt so natural to them remained so impossibly difficult for me. The wedding planning became another source of cooking anxiety. Patricia naturally assumed we would want a traditional Mexican feast for the reception, featuring all the family specialties. "We'll do it family style," she announced during one of our planning sessions. "All the women will contribute their signature dishes. Jessica, You can make the dessert flan. I'll teach you my grandmother's recipe. Flan. The thought of attempting something so delicate and temperamental made my palms sweat. I'd watched Patricia make it once, the way she carefully caramelized the sugar without burning it, how she knew exactly when the custard was set just by the way it jiggled. It seemed like magic to me, requiring intuition and skill I simply didn't possess. Our wedding day was perfect in almost every way. The ceremony took place in the garden of a historic Phoenix hotel, with the mountains providing a stunning backdrop. David looked handsome in his black tuxedo, and I felt beautiful in my grandmother's vintage lace dress. When we exchanged vows, promising to love and cherish each other through whatever challenges life might bring, I believed we could overcome anything together. The reception dinner was a testament to the Martinez family's culinary abilities. Tables groaned under the weight of perfectly prepared dishes, each one representing hours of loving preparation. The flan I had contributed sat proudly among the desserts, looking almost as good as Patricia's. Almost. It had taken me 6 attempts and Patricia's hands-on guidance throughout the entire process, but I had managed to produce something that at least resembled the family standard. "You did wonderful, mija," Patricia whispered as we watched guests enjoying the meal. "Soon you'll be making this for your own children." Children. Another expectation I hadn't fully considered. In the Martinez family, food and family were inseparable. Children learned to cook at their mother's sides, absorbing not just recipes, but values, traditions, and love. How could I pass on something I hadn't mastered myself? Our honeymoon in Cabo San Lucas was blissful. A week of sleeping late, lying on the beach, and eating at restaurants where someone else did all the cooking. David and I talked about our dreams for the future, the house we wanted to build, the children we hoped to have, the life we were creating together. "I can't wait to come home to your cooking every night," he said one evening as we watched the sunset from our hotel balcony. "Mom says you're really getting the hang of it." I smiled and nodded, not wanting to spoil the romantic mood with my ongoing kitchen struggles. Besides, maybe he was right. Maybe once we were in our own kitchen, without the pressure of Patricia's watchful eye and the weight of family tradition, I would finally find my rhythm. We moved into a beautiful new house in Scottsdale that David's company had built. The kitchen was a dream space with granite countertops, professional-grade appliances, and enough cabinet space to store a restaurant's worth of equipment. Patricia helped us stock it with all the essential tools, including a set of molcajettes, special pots for making beans, and cast-iron skillets seasoned by generations of use. "Now you can really start cooking," she announced, running her hands over the massive gas range. "This kitchen is perfect for entertaining. You'll have the whole family over for Sunday dinner in no time." But our dream kitchen became my personal nightmare. The beautiful appliances seemed to mock my efforts, the spacious counters providing ample room for spectacular failures. I burned more food in that kitchen than I had ever imagined possible. Smoke alarms became my dinner bell, and David learned to keep the windows open whenever I was cooking. I tried everything: cookbooks with step-by-step photos, online tutorials, cooking classes at the community center. I watched Food Network religiously, thinking maybe I could learn through osmosis. But something about the actual process of cooking continued to elude me. Timing, seasoning, temperature control, all the things that seemed instinctive to other people required constant vigilance from me, and even then I usually got something wrong. "Maybe you're overthinking it," suggested my friend Amanda during one of our weekly coffee dates. "Cooking is supposed to be intuitive, creative. You're approaching it like a business project." But that was exactly the problem. I understood business. Projects. There were clear objectives, measurable outcomes, defined steps to success. Cooking seemed to require some kind of instinct I simply didn't possess, an ability to taste and adjust, to know when something was done just by looking at it. David remained supportive, but I could see the disappointment in his eyes when I served him another failed dinner. He never complained, always finding something positive to say about my efforts. But I knew he was comparing my cooking to his mother's, to his sister's, to every woman in his family who seemed to cook with effortless grace. "It's fine, babe," he would say, pushing around the overcooked chicken or under-seasoned rice on his plate. "We can always order pizza." Pizza became our regular backup plan, along with a growing collection of takeout menus. I felt like a fraud every time Patricia asked how dinner preparations were going, every time Rebecca shared a new recipe she thought I might enjoy, every time Abuela Rosa asked when I was going to start making David's favorite dishes. 2 years into our marriage, we found out I was pregnant with Sophia. The news was joyful and terrifying in equal measure. As I placed my hands on my still flat belly, I thought about all the expectations that came with bringing a Martinez child into the world. This baby would grow up expecting homemade tortillas, perfectly seasoned beans, and love expressed through carefully prepared meals. "She's going to love your cooking," David said, his hand covering mine on my stomach. "Our daughter will learn all the family recipes from her mama." I nodded and smiled, but inside I felt a familiar knot of anxiety. How could I teach our daughter something I had never learned myself? How could I pass on traditions that remained foreign to me despite years of trying? The baby shower was held at Patricia's house, naturally, with a spread that showcased her legendary entertaining skills. 3 generations of Martinez women gathered to celebrate the newest addition to the family, sharing stories and advice about motherhood. As I opened gifts and accepted congratulations, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was playing a role I wasn't qualified for. "Wait until she's old enough to help in the kitchen," said David's cousin Elena, her own toddler balanced on her hip. "There's nothing sweeter than a little girl learning to make tortillas with her mama." "I started cooking with my mom when I was 4, added Rebecca. "Some of my best childhood memories are standing on a chair at the stove, stirring the beans and feeling so important." These women spoke about cooking as a bonding experience, a way of connecting with their daughters and passing on something meaningful. I tried to imagine myself teaching a little girl to measure spices and knead dough, but the image felt false, like watching someone else's life through a window. Sophia arrived on a hot July morning, perfect and beautiful and completely dependent on me for everything. As I held her tiny body against my chest, I felt a fierce protective love that surprised me with its intensity. I would do anything for this child, learn anything, become anyone she needed me to be. "She's going to be a little chef," Patricia cooed, holding her granddaughter with practiced ease. "Look at those tiny hands, perfect for making masa." I laughed, weakly, exhaustion and hormones making everything feel emotionally charged. "Maybe she'll take after her abuela." "Nonsense," Patricia said firmly. "She'll learn from her mama first." That's the way it's always been in this family. The pressure I felt was no longer just about pleasing my husband or fitting in with his family. Now I had a daughter who would grow up watching everything I did, learning what it meant to be a woman from my example. The thought of failing her the way I had failed in the kitchen felt unbearable, but maternity leave gave me hope. Finally, I had time to focus on cooking without the distractions of work and social obligations. I could spend hours practicing, experimenting, figuring out what I was doing wrong. Patricia offered to come over every day to help, bringing groceries and patient instruction. "Today we'll make caldo de pollo," she announced, unpacking ingredients I recognized but couldn't have chosen myself. "It's perfect for new mothers. Very nourishing." I watched her move through my kitchen with the same grace she displayed in her own, transforming simple ingredients into something that smelled like pure comfort. She made it look effortless, adding seasonings by instinct, adjusting the heat without consulting thermometers or timers. "The secret is the sofrito," she explained, sautéing onions, garlic, and peppers until they were fragrant and golden. "This is the base for so many of our dishes. Once you master sofrito, you can make anything." I took careful notes, measuring everything she added, timing each step. But when I tried to recreate the dish the next day, my sofrito burned while Sophia cried in her bouncer, and the chicken came out tough and flavorless. Even following Patricia's exact instructions, I somehow managed to miss something essential. "It's okay, mija," Patricia said when she tasted my attempt. "The baby makes everything harder. You'll have more time to practice when she's older." But Sophia didn't make things harder. My fundamental inability to cook did. Even with all the time and motivation in the world, I continued to struggle with the most basic techniques. I began to wonder if some people were simply born without whatever gene made cooking intuitive. When Sophia was 6 months old, I returned to work part-time, grateful for the familiar world of marketing campaigns and client meetings. In the office, I felt competent and confident, able to solve problems and create solutions. At home, I felt like an imposter in my own kitchen. David had started working longer hours, building his reputation within the family business. He came home tired and hungry, hoping for the kind of nurturing meal his mother had always provided. Instead, he found me frustrated and defeated, surrounded by the evidence of another culinary disaster. "Maybe we should hire someone to help with cooking," I suggested one evening after serving him a particularly tragic attempt at chile rellenos. "Just until I get better at it." The suggestion hung in the air like smoke from my burned dinner. David's face went through several emotions before settling on something that looked like disappointment mixed with concern. "Babe, my family would never understand that. Hiring someone to cook when you're perfectly capable of learning, they'd think." He trailed off, but I knew what he wasn't saying. They'd think I was lazy, spoiled, unwilling to fulfill my basic duties as a wife and mother. 2 years later, Lucas arrived, another beautiful baby who deserved homemade meals and family traditions. By then, I had accepted my limitations and learned to manage around them. I became an expert at supplementing my cooking failures with store-bought alternatives that looked homemade. Pre-made salsas transferred to nice bowls, rotisserie chickens presented as if I had roasted them myself, desserts from the Mexican bakery arranged on my own platters. Patricia surely knew what I was doing, but she never called me out directly. Instead, she would make subtle comments about the importance of cooking from scratch, about how children could taste the difference between real love and shortcuts. "Sophia is getting old enough to help in the kitchen," she mentioned during one family dinner. "When are you going to start teaching her?" I looked at my 4-year-old daughter, already showing signs of the Martinez family's love for food. She helped me set the table and clear dishes, chattering about how she wanted to cook like Abuela Patricia when she grew up. "Soon," I promised, though I had no idea how to teach something I hadn't learned myself. That night, as I tucked Sophia into bed, she asked the question I had been dreading. "Mama, why don't you cook like Abuela? Her food tastes different." Out of the mouths of babes. My 4-year-old daughter had noticed what everyone else was too polite to say directly. My cooking wasn't just different from Patricia's. It was inferior in ways that even a child could detect. "Everyone cooks differently, sweetheart," I said, smoothing her dark hair away from her face. "Abuela has been cooking for a very long time." "Will you teach me to cook like her?" Sophia asked, her brown eyes serious in the dim light of her bedroom. "Of course, baby girl," I promised, hoping I would figure out how to keep that promise. As the years passed, my cooking improved marginally, through sheer repetition and determination. I learned to make a few dishes adequately, mastering the art of damage control when things went wrong. But I never achieved the natural grace that seemed to come so easily to every other woman in David's family. Sophia and Lucas grew up in a household where takeout was common and cooking was often an exercise in crisis management. They learned to appreciate good food at their grandmother's house and to be patient with their mother's efforts at home. I told myself that they were getting the best of both worlds, but deep down I worried about what I was failing to give them. Family gatherings became exercises in subtle competition. Rebecca would arrive with perfectly crafted dishes that required hours of preparation, each one a testament to her skill and dedication. Cousins and aunts would contribute their specialties, creating elaborate feasts that celebrated our shared heritage. I would bring store-bought contributions disguised as homemade, always wondering if anyone noticed the deception. Jessica's tres leches cake is delicious, Patricia would say diplomatically, though I knew she could tell it came from the bakery. So moist and perfectly sweet. The praise felt hollow because we both knew the truth. I wasn't contributing to the family tradition. I was mimicking it badly while everyone pretended not to notice. Sophia started asking more pointed questions as she got older. Why did I use so many shortcuts? Why did my rice always come out wrong? Why couldn't I make tortillas like abuela? I deflected and promised to teach her someday, but how could I teach what I didn't know? By the time Sophia turned 16, the gap between expectation and reality had become a chasm that affected every aspect of our family life. David had grown tired of making excuses for my cooking, though he never said so directly. The children had learned to be diplomatic about my efforts, while clearly preferring their grandmother's meals. And I had developed a complex about my own kitchen that made every meal feel like a potential failure. That's where I found myself on this particular Tuesday evening, staring at another ruined dinner while Patricia's text message mocked me from my phone screen. Looking forward to tasting your cooking tonight, mija. I'm sure you'll make the family proud this time. This time. As if there had been previous times when I had made them proud. As if this wasn't just another opportunity for me to prove that after 12 years of marriage, I still couldn't master the most basic requirement of being a Martinez wife. Little did I know that this burned dinner would be the catalyst for everything. That came next. Sometimes our greatest disasters become the foundation for our most unexpected triumphs, and my inability to cook was about to transform from my greatest shame into my most powerful weapon. The morning after the enchilada disaster, I sat in my car outside Whole Foods, staring at my shopping list and feeling like a fraud. Patricia had given me specific instructions for tonight's family dinner. Make her famous pozole from scratch, including grinding the hominy and toasting the chilies myself. She'd written the recipe in her careful handwriting, complete with little notes like toast until fragrant but not bitter, and simmer until the pork falls apart. I'd been to this same grocery store hundreds of times, but today felt different. Today I was shopping for ingredients I barely understood, hoping to create something that would finally prove I belonged in this family. As I walked through the automatic doors, the familiar anxiety settled in my chest like a weight I couldn't shake. The produce section overwhelmed me immediately. There were at least 6 different types of dried chiles hanging in plastic bags, and I had no idea how to tell if they were fresh or how much I actually needed. Patricia's recipe called for guajillo and ancho chiles, about 2 handfuls each. But her hands were smaller than mine. Did that matter? How could a recipe be so vague about something so important? I picked up a bag of what I hoped were guajillo chiles, holding them up to the light like I'd seen Patricia do. They should be pliable but not brittle, she'd told me, with a deep red color that wasn't faded or dusty. These looked acceptable, but I honestly couldn't tell if they met her standards or if I was just hoping for the best. Those are perfect for pozole, said a voice behind me. I turned to see a woman about my age, her cart already loaded with fresh vegetables and what looked like ingredients for several elaborate meals. She had the confident air of someone who actually knew what she was doing in a kitchen. "You can tell?" I asked, probably sounding more desperate than I intended. She laughed, a warm sound that made me feel less alone in my confusion. "My abuela taught me to pick chiles when I was 10. Those guajillos have good color, and see how they're still flexible? That means they're fresh enough to give you good flavor without being bitter." "I'm making pozole for my mother-in-law," I confessed, as if admitting a crime. She gave me her family recipe, but I'm terrified I'm going to mess it up. Pozole is forgiving, the woman said kindly. As long as you toast the chilies properly and don't rush the cooking, it's hard to ruin. Are you making red or green? Red, I said, consulting Patricia's recipe again, with pork shoulder and hominy. Classic. Here's a tip my grandmother swore by. When you're toasting the chilies, they'll smell amazing right before they're perfect. Trust your nose more than your eyes. She moved on to select her own ingredients, leaving me feeling slightly more confident, but still overwhelmed by everything I didn't know. How did other women make this look so effortless? How did they develop the intuition to know when something smelled right or felt ready? I spent 45 minutes in that store, second-guessing every choice. The pork shoulder looked good, but was it too fatty? The white onions seemed fresh, but should I have chosen yellow instead? The hominy came in different brands, and I had no idea if there was a meaningful difference between them. By the time I got home, Sophia was already back from school, sprawled across the kitchen counter doing homework while snacking on chips and salsa. At 16, she'd grown into a beautiful young woman who looked exactly like David, but had inherited my stubborn streak and analytical mind. Making pozole? She asked, glancing at my grocery bags. Abuela's recipe? Attempting to make pozole, I corrected. There's a significant difference. Sophia looked up from her chemistry homework with the same expression David got when he was trying to solve a problem. Want help? I've watched Abuela make it like a dozen times. You have? I felt a stab of something that might have been jealousy or relief. When? Whenever I stay over there on weekends. She's been teaching me stuff since I was little. I can make decent rice now, and my beans are almost as good as hers. I stared at my daughter, realizing that while I'd been struggling and failing, in my own kitchen, she'd been quietly learning from her grandmother. Patricia had been passing on family knowledge to Sophia in a way she'd never been able to do with me. Why didn't you tell me? I asked, trying to keep the hurt out of my voice. Sophia shrugged, the way teenagers do when they don't want to make a big deal out of something that feels significant to everyone else. You never asked. And you always seem so stressed when you're cooking, like you don't want help. She was right. I had been approaching cooking like a solo mission, determined to prove I could master it on my own. The idea of accepting help from my 16-year-old daughter felt like admitting defeat, but maybe defeat was exactly what I needed. Okay, I said, taking a deep breath. Teach me. Sophia's face lit up with genuine excitement. Really? You want me to show you Abuela's tricks? I want you to show me everything you know. For the next hour, Sophia guided me through pozole preparation with the patience of someone who'd inherited Patricia's teaching instincts. She showed me how to examine each chile individually, discarding any with dark spots or tears. She demonstrated the proper way to remove stems and seeds, explaining that too many seeds would make the sauce bitter. Abuela says the secret is in the toasting, Sophia said, heating a cast-iron skillet over medium heat. You want them to puff up a little and smell nutty, but if you see any black spots, you've gone too far. I watched my daughter work with growing amazement. Her movements in the kitchen were confident and practiced, nothing like my own hesitant fumbling. She handled the hot chilies without burning herself, judged their doneness by subtle changes in aroma, and moved between tasks with an efficiency I envied. When did you become so good at this? I asked as she demonstrated the proper technique for browning the pork. Practice, she said simply. And Abuela never gets frustrated when I mess up. She just shows me again. The implied criticism stung because it was accurate. I did get frustrated when things went wrong in the kitchen, and my stress probably made Sophia reluctant to offer help or ask questions. I'd been so focused on my own failures that I hadn't created space for my daughter to learn alongside me. Mom, Sophia said carefully, as if she'd been thinking about this for a while. Why do you hate cooking so much? The question caught me off guard. I don't hate It, I just, I'm not good at it. But you don't try to get better. Not really. You follow recipes exactly, but you don't experiment or play around with flavors. Cooking isn't like a science experiment where everything has to be precise. I stirred the browning pork, considering. Her words. She was right again. I approached cooking like a legal brief or a marketing campaign, looking for rules and formulas that would guarantee success. But maybe that was exactly the wrong approach. Your abuela makes it look so natural, I said, like she was born knowing how to cook. She told me she burned dinner every night for the first year she was married, Sophia said with a grin. Abuelo used to keep crackers hidden in his truck in case he couldn't eat what she made. Really? The idea that Patricia had ever struggled in the kitchen seemed impossible. She said cooking is like learning to drive. At first you have to think about every little thing, but eventually it becomes automatic. You just have to be patient with yourself. As we worked together, something shifted in my relationship with the kitchen. With Sophia's guidance, the pozole actually began to smell like the version Patricia made. The toasted chilies created a rich, complex base that filled the house with warmth and promise. The pork grew tender and flavorful, and the hominy added exactly the right texture and substance. "This is going to be good," Sophia said confidently, tasting the broth and nodding with approval. Maybe not as good as abuela's yet, but definitely edible. Definitely edible felt like high praise coming from my discerning daughter. For the first time in years, I felt hopeful about serving something I'd made to David's family. Lucas came, home from soccer practice just as we were finishing the garnishes, his hair still damp with sweat, and his backpack trailing mud across my clean floors. At 13, he was all elbows and appetite, constantly hungry and surprisingly diplomatic about my cooking disasters. "Smells good in here," he said, stealing a piece of avocado from the garnish bowl. Different from usual. "Sophia helped me," I admitted. "Turns out she's been holding out on us." "Sophia can cook?" Lucas looked at his sister with new respect. "Since when?" "Since always, dummy. You just never pay attention to anything that doesn't involve sports or video games." "Can you teach me too?" Lucas asked, surprising us both. I'm tired of not knowing how to make anything except cereal and sandwiches. Looking at my children, I realized how much of their culinary education I'd been neglecting. Sophia had found her own way to learn from her grandmother, but Lucas had been left out entirely. David and I had both assumed the kids would naturally absorb cooking knowledge somehow, but we'd never created opportunities for them to actually practice. "We could all learn together," I suggested. "Make it a family project." "Dad, too?" Sophia asked skeptically. "He's almost as hopeless as you are, Mom." She was right. David could grill meat and make basic breakfast foods, but his kitchen skills weren't much more advanced than mine. He'd grown up in a house where his mother did all the cooking, and he'd married a woman he expected to take over that role. Neither of us had ever really learned to cook together as partners. David arrived home just as the pozole reached perfect doneness, the pork falling apart at the touch of a spoon and the broth rich with chili flavor. He stopped in the doorway of the kitchen, inhaling deeply with an expression of genuine surprise. "Did you order from Casa Miranda?" he asked, naming our favorite Mexican restaurant. "I made it," I said, stirring the pot with more confidence than I'd felt in years. With Sophia's help. Sophia helped? David looked at our daughter with the same surprise Lucas had shown. "Since when do you cook?" "Since Abuela started teaching me when I was little," Sophia said matter-of-factly. "Mom never asked, so I never mentioned it." David and I exchanged a look that acknowledged our parental oversight. We'd been so focused on my struggles with cooking that we'd missed our daughter's growing competence in the kitchen. "It smells incredible," David said, kissing my forehead and stealing a taste from the pot. His eyes widened with genuine amazement. "Jess, this is really good. Like, restaurant good." The praise felt different this time because it was earned rather than diplomatic. I'd actually created something delicious, and having Sophia's guidance had made the process enjoyable instead of stressful. When we arrived at Patricia's house that evening, I carried the pot of pozole with genuine pride instead of the usual dread. The whole family was gathered in the backyard, kids playing in the pool while adults sat around the patio table sharing stories and cold drinks. "Jessica brought pozole," Patricia announced as we set up the food table. She lifted the lid and inhaled deeply, her eyebrows rising with what looked like surprise. "Mija, this smells wonderful." "Sophia helped me," I said quickly, not wanting to take credit I didn't deserve. "She knew all your tricks." Patricia ladled out a bowl and tasted it carefully, her expression thoughtful. I held my breath, waiting for the polite praise that meant I'd failed to meet her standards. "This is very good," she said finally, and her tone carried genuine approval. "The chilies are perfectly balanced, and the pork is tender. You're finally learning to trust your instincts." But I hadn't trusted my instincts at all. I'd trusted Sophia's knowledge and Patricia's indirect teaching, passed down through my daughter in ways I'd never expected. Still, the compliment felt wonderful after years of barely concealed disappointment. Rebecca tried the pozole and nodded with approval. Finally, someone besides Mom who can make decent pozole. I was getting tired of being the only backup cook. The family gathered around the table as the sun set behind the mountains, sharing the meal I'd helped create. For the first time in 12 years of family dinners, I felt like I'd contributed something meaningful instead of just filling space. "Mom, tell them about the cooking lessons," Sophia said between bites. "How we're all going to learn together." David looked at me with interest. "Cooking lessons? I thought maybe we could make it a family activity," I explained, feeling suddenly self-conscious. "All of us learning together, taking turns teaching what we know." "Even me?" Lucas asked hopefully. "I don't know anything yet." "Especially you," I said. "We'll all start from wherever we are and help each other get better." Patricia's face lit up with the kind of joy I hadn't seen from her in years. "Mija, that's a wonderful idea. Learning together, as a family. That's how it should be." Abuela Rosa, now in her 80s but still sharp as a tack, reached over to pat my hand. "Sometimes the best teachers are the ones who understand struggle. You'll teach your children patience because you know how hard it is to learn." Her words hit me with unexpected force. Maybe my years of kitchen disasters weren't just failures to overcome, but experiences that could help me become a better teacher for my own children. Maybe struggle and empathy were more valuable teaching tools than natural talent. As we drove home that night, the empty pozole pot in the back seat like a trophy, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Excitement about cooking. Not anxiety or dread, but genuine curiosity about what I might learn next. "That was fun," Sophia said from the passenger seat. "Cooking together, I mean. It felt different when you weren't stressed about everything." "I was still stressed," I admitted. "But having you there made it feel possible instead of impossible." "We should do it again tomorrow," Lucas chimed in from the back seat. "Can you teach me how to make those tortillas Abuela makes?" "I can't make tortillas," I said automatically, then caught myself. "Yet. I can't make tortillas yet." That small word change felt significant. Yet implied possibility, growth, hope for the future. Can't was a door slamming shut, but yet was a door standing slightly ajar. Over the next several weeks, our kitchen became a classroom where we all took turns being teacher and student. Sophia showed us the tricks Patricia had taught her. David shared his grilling expertise, and Lucas brought beginner's enthusiasm that reminded us all why cooking could be fun. I started a cooking journal, documenting not just recipes, but observations about technique, timing, and flavor combinations that worked. Unlike my previous approach of following directions blindly, I began to understand the why behind cooking methods. When you're sautéing onions, Sophia explained during one of our sessions. Listen to the sound they make in the pan. When the sizzling gets quieter, they're getting sweet and ready for the next step. These small revelations accumulated into genuine understanding. Cooking wasn't just about following recipes, it was about developing relationships with ingredients, learning to read subtle signs, and trusting that practice would eventually lead to intuition. Amanda noticed the change when she came over for dinner one Friday evening. I'd made chicken enchiladas from scratch, including the sauce, and they were actually good enough to serve to company. "What happened to you?" she asked, taking a second, helping. "This is amazing! Did you hire a chef?" "I started learning from my daughter," I said. "Turns out she's been getting cooking lessons from her grandmother for years." "And you didn't know?" "I never asked. I was so focused on my own failures that I missed what was happening right in front of me." Amanda shook her head with the kind of amazement reserved for obvious truths that take years to discover. Sometimes the answers we're looking for are closer than we think. That night, as I cleaned up the kitchen with Sophia's help, I reflected on how much had changed in just a few weeks. The space that had once felt like a battlefield now felt like a place of possibility. My relationship with my daughter had deepened through our shared learning, and even David seemed more interested in participating in meal preparation. "Mom," Sophia said as she dried the last pot, "I have an idea for tomorrow's lesson." "What's that?" "Tamales. Abuela said she'd come over and teach all of us together. It's a big project, but she thinks we're ready." The thought of making tamales, one of the most complex and traditional dishes in the Martinez repertoire, would have terrified me a month earlier. But now it felt like an exciting challenge rather than an inevitable disaster. "Let's do it," I said, surprising myself with my confidence. "What's the worst that could happen?" "We could end up with the most expensive tamale filling in Arizona," Sophia said with a grin. "But at least we'll learn something." As I went to bed that night, I thought about all the years I'd spent feeling inadequate in my own kitchen, convinced that I was fundamentally broken when it came to cooking. But maybe the problem hadn't been my ability to learn, but my approach to learning. Maybe I'd been trying to master something in isolation that was meant to be shared. The next morning brought a text from Patricia that would have sent me into panic mode just weeks earlier. "Mija, I'm so excited for Tamale Day. I'll bring masa and my best pot. We're going to have so much fun teaching everyone together." Instead of dread, I felt anticipation. Instead of worry about failing in front of my mother-in-law, I looked forward to learning alongside my family. The shift in perspective felt like stepping out of a prison I'd built for myself, one burnt dinner at a time. But I had no idea that this newfound confidence in the kitchen was about to lead me somewhere completely unexpected. Sometimes, when we stop running from our fears and start embracing our curiosities, life has a way of opening doors we never even knew existed. And behind one of those doors was waiting an opportunity that would change everything I thought I knew about myself, my abilities, and my place in the world. The tamale lesson was just the beginning of a journey I couldn't have imagined when I was standing in my smoky kitchen, staring at another ruined dinner, and wondering how I'd failed so spectacularly at something that seemed to come naturally to everyone else. Sometimes our greatest struggles prepare us for our most unexpected victories, and sometimes the very thing we think disqualifies us becomes the foundation for everything we never dared to dream. The tamale-making day arrived, with Patricia showing up at my door at 7 in the morning, her arms loaded with ingredients and equipment I'd never seen before. She'd brought her ancient masa spreader, a collection of corn husks soaking in warm water, and enough pork shoulder to feed a small army. "We start early because tamales are a commitment," she announced, transforming my kitchen into a tamale assembly line. "This is how my grandmother taught me, and her grandmother before that. Today, you become part of the tradition." Sophia and Lucas gathered around the kitchen island with the reverence usually reserved for important family ceremonies. David joined us, looking slightly overwhelmed but determined to participate. Even he seemed to understand that this was more than just a cooking lesson. Patricia began with the masa, explaining how the texture should feel when it was ready for spreading. Like thick peanut butter, she said, beating the mixture by hand with a wooden spoon that looked older than I was. Too thick and the tamales will be heavy. Too thin and they'll fall apart. I watched her hands work the masa, adding warm broth gradually until the consistency was perfect. When she handed me the spoon, I tried to replicate her technique, but my mixture looked nothing like hers. The masa was lumpy where hers had been smooth, uneven where hers had been uniform. Here, mija, Patricia said gently, placing her hands over mine on the spoon. Feel the rhythm. Cooking is like dancing. You have to find the beat. For the first time, I understood what she meant. There was a rhythm to her movements, a cadence that came from decades of muscle memory. As I let her guide my hands, I began to feel it too, the way the masa responded to different pressures and speeds. That's it, Sophia said, watching my technique improve under her grandmother's guidance. You're getting it, Mom. But even as my masa technique improved, I found myself observing the process differently than my family members did. While they focused on tradition and time-honored methods, I couldn't help but think about efficiency and innovation. Why did we have to beat the mesa by hand when a stand mixer could do it faster? Why soak the corn husks for hours when a quick steam might work just as well? I kept these thoughts to myself, not wanting to disrupt the sacred nature of the lesson. But something was shifting in my approach to cooking, a perspective that felt uniquely mine rather than borrowed from Patricia's generations of knowledge. The assembly process revealed another interesting difference in our approaches. Patricia and Sophia spread the masa with their fingers, working by feel and intuition. Rebecca, who had joined us mid-morning, used the same instinctive technique, but when I tried to copy them, my tamales came out uneven and messy. Maybe try this, I said to myself, picking up an offset spatula from my drawer. I'd bought it years ago for cake decorating and never used it, but it seemed perfect for spreading mesa evenly across the corn husks. What's that? Lucas asked, watching me work. Just a different tool, I said, demonstrating how the spatula created perfectly even layers of masa in half the time it took to spread by hand. Sometimes there are easier ways to get the same result. Patricia watched my technique with interest, rather than disapproval. Muy inteligente, she said. I never thought of using a tool like that. Would it work for the filling too? Sophia asked, always quick to see practical applications. I handed her a small ice cream scoop I'd forgotten I owned. Try this for portioning the meat. It might keep the filling more consistent. As we worked, I found myself naturally gravitating toward tools and techniques that made the process more efficient without sacrificing quality. A bench scraper for cleaning the work surface quickly. A spray bottle for keeping the corn husks moist. Small innovations that my marketing brain applied automatically to the cooking process. You think like an engineer, David observed, watching. Me streamline the tamale assembly line. Always looking for better systems. Is that bad? I asked, suddenly self-conscious about my different approach. Not bad, Patricia said thoughtfully. Different. You see possibilities that come from outside our tradition. That's valuable too. By late afternoon, we had produced 4 dozen tamales that looked remarkably professional. More importantly, the process had revealed something about my relationship with cooking that I'd never recognized before. I might not have inherited generations of culinary instinct, but I had other skills that could be applied to the kitchen. These are really good, Lucas said, biting into his 3rd tamale. Maybe even better than the ones from Casa Miranda. Different technique, same delicious result, Patricia said with satisfaction. Jessica found her own way to make them. That phrase stayed with me long after the family had gone home and the kitchen had been cleaned. Found her own way. Maybe that was what I'd been missing all these years. Instead of trying to cook exactly like Patricia or Rebecca or any other Martinez woman, maybe I needed to find my own path through the culinary landscape. Over the following weeks, I threw myself into cooking with a new sense of purpose. Instead of blindly following traditional recipes, I began experimenting with modifications that made sense to my analytical mind. I researched the science behind cooking techniques, understanding why certain methods worked and how they could be improved or adapted. "You're turning into a food nerd," Amanda observed during one of our coffee dates. "Last week you spent 20 minutes explaining the difference between various types of salt." "There are important differences," I protested. "The crystal size affects how quickly it dissolves, which changes when you add it to a recipe." "See? Food nerd. But in a good way. You seem excited about cooking for the first time since I've known you." She was right. Instead of dreading time in the kitchen, I found myself looking forward to experimenting with new techniques and ingredients. I started following food science blogs, watching cooking shows that focused on technique rather than just recipes, and building a library of cookbooks that explained the why behind culinary traditions. My breakthrough came on a Tuesday evening when I was making Patricia's rice recipe for the 100th time. I'd finally mastered her traditional method, but I couldn't help wondering if there were other approaches that might work just as well. Instead of cooking the rice on the stovetop, I decided to try the oven method I'd read about in a food science article. The result was perfect rice with less hands-on attention required. Same flavor, same texture, but achieved through a completely different process. When I served it to David that night, he couldn't tell the difference. "This is really good," he said, helping himself to seconds. "Did you change something?" "Just the method," I said, explaining my experiment. Sometimes innovation can improve on tradition without losing what makes it special. That success gave me confidence to keep experimenting. I started documenting my modifications in detailed notes, creating what amounted to my own cookbook of adapted traditional recipes. Instead of feeling like a failure for not cooking exactly like Patricia, I began to see my different approach as a strength. Sophia noticed the change immediately. "Mom, you're actually having fun cooking now," she said one evening as we worked together on a modified version of Patricia's mole recipe. I'd simplified some of the more time-intensive steps without compromising the final flavor. "I think I'm finally finding my own style," I said, tasting the sauce and adjusting the seasoning. "It's taken me long enough." "Your style is good," Lucas added, looking up from his homework. "Abuela's food tastes like tradition, but yours tastes like, I don't know, like thinking." "Like thinking?" I laughed at his description. "Yeah, like you figured out how to make it make sense? Does that sound weird?" It didn't sound weird at all. It sounded like exactly what I'd been trying to do without realizing it. Instead of accepting cooking as a mysterious art that required intuition I didn't possess, I'd been approaching it as a problem to be solved, a system to be understood and improved. My confidence grew with each successful experiment. I started sharing my modified recipes with other women at Sophia's school events, explaining the shortcuts and innovations I'd developed. To my surprise, they were genuinely interested in my approaches. "I never thought of using a food processor for that," said Maria Gonzalez, another mother who struggled with traditional tamale preparation. "That would save so much time during the holidays." "And using parchment paper instead of corn husks when you run out is brilliant," added Carmen Rodriguez. "My kids wouldn't know the difference, and it's so much easier to work with." These conversations sparked an idea that had been brewing in the back of my mind. What if there were other women like me, women who wanted to cook traditional foods, but felt intimidated by the complexity and time requirements? What if my approach to simplifying and modernizing classic recipes could help them too? I started a food blog on a whim, calling it Modern Mexican Kitchen, and focusing on accessible versions of traditional recipes. My first post was about my simplified mold technique, complete with step-by-step photos and explanations of why each modification worked. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Comments poured in from women who had struggled with the same cooking challenges I'd faced, grateful for recipes that honored tradition while acknowledging modern constraints like time and ingredient availability. "Finally, someone who gets it," wrote one commenter. "I love my grandmother's recipes, but I don't have all day to make dinner. These modifications are exactly what I needed." "Thank you for making mole accessible," wrote another. "I've been intimidated by it for years, but your version actually seems doable." Within a month, the blog had thousands of regular readers and dozens of comments on every post. Women shared their own modifications and innovations, creating a community of home cooks who were finding their own ways to honor culinary traditions while adapting to contemporary life. David was amazed by the blog's success. "I had no idea. There were so many people looking for this kind of content," he said, reading over my shoulder as I responded to comments. "I think there are a lot of women like me," I said. "Women who want to cook traditional foods but feel overwhelmed by the traditional methods. Maybe our generation needs permission to do things differently." The blog led to unexpected opportunities. Food bloggers started reaching out for collaborations. Local newspapers wrote articles about my approach to modernizing Mexican cuisine. I was invited to speak at cooking classes and community events about bridging the gap between tradition and innovation. "Mom, you're becoming famous," Sophia said, showing me a mention of my blog on a popular food website. "This is so cool." The recognition felt surreal. After years of feeling like a failure in the kitchen, I was suddenly being celebrated for my unique approach to cooking. The very things that had made me feel inadequate, my analytical mind and systematic approach, had become my greatest strengths. Patricia's reaction to my blog was the validation I hadn't realized I was seeking. She spent an entire afternoon reading through my posts, trying some of my modified recipes, and asking detailed questions about my techniques. "Mija, this is wonderful," she said finally. "You've found a way to keep our traditions alive for women who might not have time for the old methods. That's a gift." "You're not upset that I'm changing your recipes?" I asked, still worried about overstepping cultural boundaries. "Recipes are meant to evolve," she said with conviction. "Every generation adapts them to their circumstances. Your grandmother probably cooked differently than her grandmother, and your children will cook differently than you. That's how traditions survive." Her acceptance meant everything to me, but it also highlighted how much my perspective had shifted. I was no longer trying to become someone else in the kitchen. Instead, I was becoming more fully myself, applying my natural strengths to a domain that had always felt foreign. The blog continued to grow, attracting attention from unexpected places. Food magazines asked me to contribute articles. Cooking equipment companies wanted to partner with me to test their products. Local television stations invited me for cooking segments focused on my innovative approaches to traditional recipes. Each opportunity built on the last, creating momentum I never could have anticipated. What had started as a personal journey to become competent in my own kitchen was transforming into something much larger, a platform for helping other women find their own paths through culinary traditions. "You should write a cookbook," Amanda suggested during one of our weekly coffee dates. "All these blog posts could become chapters, and you could include more of your modifications and techniques." "A cookbook?" The idea seemed impossibly ambitious. "I don't know if I'm qualified for something like that." "Are you kidding? You've basically already written it, and you're helping more people with food than most celebrity chefs. Your approach is unique and valuable." That evening, I mentioned Amanda's suggestion to David over dinner, a meal I'd prepared without stress or anxiety for the first time in our marriage. He looked at me with the kind of pride I'd always wanted to see in his eyes when it came to my cooking. "I think that's a great idea," he said. "You found something special with this blog. A cookbook would reach even more people." "What would I even call it?" I asked, still overwhelmed by the possibility. Something about finding your own way, Sophia suggested from across the table. That's what you did, right? You found your own way to cook. The modern Mexican kitchen, finding your own way to traditional flavors, Lucas offered. That sounds like a real cookbook title. As I lay in bed that night, considering the possibility of writing a cookbook, I reflected on how completely my relationship with cooking had transformed. The kitchen that had once been a source of stress and inadequacy had become a place of creativity and confidence. The family recipes that had once seemed impossibly complex now felt like puzzles I enjoyed solving. But more than that, I'd discovered something about myself that went beyond cooking. I'd learned that there wasn't just one right way to do things, that my different perspective could be valuable rather than deficient. The analytical skills I'd developed in marketing, the systematic thinking that had made me successful in business, weren't obstacles to overcome in the kitchen. They were tools that could enhance traditional methods rather than replace them. The cookbook idea planted itself firmly in my mind, growing stronger with each passing day. I started organizing my blog posts into logical chapters, developing new recipes that built on my established techniques, and thinking about how to present my approach in book form. What I didn't know was that someone else had been reading my blog with great interest, someone whose attention would change everything about my culinary journey. While I was contemplating writing a cookbook, forces were already in motion that would take my newfound confidence and platform in directions I never could have imagined. Sometimes when we stop trying to fit into someone else's mold and start creating our own, the world responds in ways that exceed our wildest dreams. I was about to discover that my journey from kitchen disaster to confident home cook was just the beginning of a much larger adventure, one that would validate everything I'd learned about finding your own way while honoring the traditions that matter most. The email arrived on a Thursday morning while I was photographing a new recipe for the blog. I almost deleted it, assuming it was spam since the sender's name wasn't familiar, and the subject line seemed too good to be true. Food Network Opportunity, Modern Mexican Kitchen Blog. But something made me open it anyway, maybe the same. Instinct that had finally led me to trust my own cooking intuition. The message was from Michael Thompson, a producer at Food Network, and as I read it, my coffee grew cold and my hands started shaking. Dear Jessica, I've been following your blog for several months and am impressed by your unique approach to traditional Mexican cuisine. Your ability to make complex recipes accessible while maintaining authenticity is exactly what we're looking for in a new show concept. Would you be available for a phone conversation to discuss a potential opportunity? I read the email 3 times before the words fully registered. Food Network. A show concept. My blog had somehow caught the attention of people who could offer opportunities I'd never even dared to imagine. My first instinct was to assume it was a mistake or a scam. Television producers didn't discover random food bloggers from Phoenix, especially food bloggers who had only been cooking competently for less than a year. But the email included specific references to my recent posts and detailed knowledge of my approach that suggested the sender had genuinely studied my work. I called Amanda immediately, my voice shaking as I read the email aloud. "Are you serious right now?" She screamed so loudly I had to hold the phone away from my ear. "Jessica, this is huge. You have to call him back immediately." "I don't know anything about television," I protested. "I'm not a chef. I'm just someone who figured out how to cook without burning down my kitchen." "That's exactly why this is perfect," Amanda said with conviction. "You represent every woman who's ever felt intimidated by cooking. You're relatable in a way that celebrity chefs aren't." After hanging up with Amanda, I sat in my kitchen staring at the email and trying to process what this could mean. Just 2 years ago, I'd been hiding store-bought food in my own serving dishes, terrified that Patricia would discover my culinary deceptions. Now someone at Food Network thought my cooking was worth putting on television. I forwarded the email to David, who called me back within minutes. "Jess, this is incredible," he said. his voice full of excitement. Do you realize what kind of opportunity this could be? A chance to humiliate myself on national television? I suggested. A chance to help thousands of women who struggle with the same cooking challenges you overcame. Think about all the comments you get on your blog, from women who say you've changed their relationship with cooking. He was right. The blog had connected me with women across the country who shared similar stories of feeling inadequate in their kitchens, especially when it came to traditional family recipes. If I could reach even more people through television, maybe the opportunity was worth the terror. I spent the rest of the day researching Michael Thompson and Food Network's recent programming decisions. Everything I found suggested the email was legitimate, and Michael's background included several successful shows featuring home cooks rather than professional chefs. That evening, I called the number he'd provided, my heart racing as I dialed. "Michael Thompson," he answered on the second ring, his voice warm and professional. "This is Jessica Martinez," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "I received your email about my blog. Jessica, thank you so much for calling. I've been hoping to speak with you for weeks. Your blog is exactly the kind of content we're looking for at Food Network right now." I'm flattered, but I should probably mention that I'm not a professional chef. I'm just a home cook who figured out some shortcuts. Michael laughed, a genuine sound that immediately put me at ease. "That's precisely why you're perfect for this. We're not looking for another celebrity chef show. We want something authentic, relatable, focused on real people cooking real food in real kitchens." He explained that Food Network was developing a new show concept called Your Way Home, featuring home cooks who had found innovative approaches to traditional cooking challenges. The format would follow hosts as they taught their techniques to other home cooks, emphasizing accessibility and personal adaptation over rigid adherence to classical methods. Your blog posts about modernizing Mexican cuisine while respecting tradition show exactly the kind of perspective we want to showcase, Michael continued. You've managed to bridge the gap between authentic flavors and contemporary convenience without losing what makes the food special. What would something like this involve? I asked, still unable to believe this conversation was actually happening. We'd want to do a screen test first, see how you come across on camera. If that goes well, we'd film a pilot episode featuring you teaching your techniques to a small group of home cooks. The response to the pilot would determine whether we move forward with a full season. A screen test, a pilot episode, possibly a full season of television. The progression seemed impossibly fast, like jumping from riding a bicycle to piloting a spacecraft. Can I think about it? I asked. Of course, but I should mention that we're hoping to move quickly on this. The test would need to happen within the next few weeks if you're interested. After we hung up, I sat in my kitchen surrounded by the tools and techniques that had finally made cooking enjoyable for me. The offset spatula that had revolutionized my tamale making. The modified recipes printed and organized in binders. The confidence I'd built one successful meal at a time. David found me there an hour later, still processing the conversation. What did he say? He asked, sitting down beside me at the kitchen island. They want me to do a screen test for a show about home cooking. About teaching other people the techniques I've developed. And I'm terrified, I admitted. What if I'm terrible on camera? What if I freeze up and can't explain my methods? What if I'm just not cut out for this kind of thing? David took my hands in his, the same gesture he'd used when he proposed on Camelback Mountain all those years ago. Jess, you've already been teaching people through your blog. You've helped hundreds of women feel more confident in their kitchens. Television is just another way to reach more people. But television is different. It's permanent. If I mess up, it's recorded forever. And if you succeed, you could help thousands of people instead of hundreds. Think about all the women who feel the way you used to feel about cooking. That night, I lay awake thinking about my journey from kitchen disaster to confident home cook. Every burned dinner, every failed attempt at Patricia's recipes, every moment of feeling inadequate had led to this opportunity. Maybe all those struggles had been preparation for something larger than I'd ever imagined. The next morning, I called Patricia to tell her about the Food Network opportunity. Her reaction surprised me. "Mia, this is wonderful news," she said immediately. "You've found a way to honor our traditions while making them accessible to more people. That's a beautiful thing. You're not worried that I'll misrepresent Mexican cuisine or oversimplify your family recipes?" "Jessica, you've spent years learning to respect these foods while making them your own. You understand the heart of our cooking even if your methods are different. That understanding will come through on television." Her confidence in me meant everything, but I still felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of the opportunity. That afternoon, Sophia came home from school to find me pacing around the kitchen, practicing explanations of my techniques. "Mom, what are you doing?" she asked, dropping her backpack by the door. "Practicing for a screen test," I said, feeling ridiculous as I said it. "Food Network wants to see if I can teach cooking on television." Sophia's face lit up with genuine excitement. "Mom, that's amazing! You're going to be on TV?" "Maybe. If I don't embarrass myself during the test." "You won't," she said with the absolute certainty that only teenagers can muster. "You're a good teacher. Look how much Lucas and I have learned from you." "That's different. You're my kids. You have to listen to me." "But we actually learned," Sophia pointed out. "And not just recipes, but why things work the way they do. That's what makes you different from other cooking teachers." Over the weekend, I spent hours reviewing my blog posts and organizing my thoughts about cooking philosophy and technique. I practiced explaining my methods out loud, timing myself, and working on eliminating the nervous habits that emerged when I felt pressured. David set up a video camera so I could see how I looked and sounded when explaining recipes. The first few attempts were disasters, my voice shaking and my explanations unclear. But gradually, as I focused on the cooking rather than the camera, I began to relax and find my natural teaching rhythm. "That was really good," David said after watching me demonstrate my simplified mole technique. "You sounded confident and knowledgeable. Most importantly, you sounded like yourself." The screen test was scheduled for the following Wednesday at a professional kitchen facility in Los Angeles. Food Network would fly me out for the day, film me teaching a few techniques, and evaluate whether I had the presence and teaching ability necessary for television. I spent the intervening days obsessing over what to wear, what recipes to demonstrate, and how to present myself as both approachable and authoritative. Amanda helped me practice answering potential interview questions, while Sophia and Lucas offered teenagers perspectives on what made cooking instructions clear and engaging. "Don't try to be someone else," Patricia advised during our final practice session. "The people at Food Network already know what they like about your approach. Just be yourself and trust that it's enough." The morning of the screen test, I flew to Los Angeles with a suitcase full of ingredients and equipment, my stomach churning with nerves and excitement. The kitchen facility was state-of-the-art, with professional cameras and lighting that made everything look like a set from an actual cooking show. Michael Thompson met me in the lobby, his warm smile immediately putting me at ease. "Jessica, thank you so much for coming. Are you ready to show us what you can do?" The test began with a brief interview about my background in cooking philosophy. I explained how my struggles with traditional methods had led me to develop more accessible approaches, how my blog had connected me with women facing similar challenges, and why I believed there was value in adapting classic recipes for contemporary life. "Tell me about your mole technique," Michael said. "What makes your approach different?" I demonstrated my simplified mole method, explaining each modification and why it worked without compromising flavor. As I cooked, my nerves disappeared, and my natural enthusiasm for the subject took over. This was what I'd been doing on my blog for months, just with cameras instead of photographs documenting the process. "Now show us how you'd teach this to someone who's never made mole before," the director said. I imagined I was talking to one of my blog readers, someone intimidated by traditional mole recipes, but eager to create authentic flavors at home. I broke down each step, explained common mistakes and how to avoid them, and shared the shortcuts that made the process manageable for busy home cooks. "Excellent," Michael said as I finished plating the final dish. "You have a natural teaching style that's both informative and encouraging. Most importantly, you make complex techniques seem achievable." The test continued with demonstrations of my tamale assembly method and my approach to perfect rice. With each recipe, I felt more comfortable in front of the cameras, more confident in my ability to explain not just what to do, but why it worked. "We'd like you to try one more thing," the director said. "Cook with someone who's never used your techniques before. Show us how you'd guide them through the process." They brought in a production assistant named Maria, who had volunteered to be my student. She was nervous about cooking on camera, which actually helped me focus on being encouraging and supportive rather than worrying about my own performance. "Have you ever made tamales before?" I asked her as we began the demonstration. "Never," she admitted. "My grandmother always said they were too complicated for beginners." "That's what I thought too," I said, handing her my offset spatula. "But with the right tools and techniques, they're actually very manageable. Let me show you." As I guided Maria through the process, I felt completely in my element. Teaching had always been natural for me, whether in business presentations or helping my children with homework. Applying those same skills to cooking felt like a perfect fit. "Wow, these actually look professional," Maria said, examining her finished tamales. "I can't believe I just made these." "That's the reaction we want," Michael said quietly to the camera crew. "She makes people feel capable instead of intimidated." After the filming wrapped, Michael walked me through the next steps in the process. The pilot episode would feature you working with 3 home cooks, teaching them your techniques, and showing how traditional recipes can be adapted for modern kitchens. We'd film over 2 days, probably next month if you're interested in moving forward. "What happens if the pilot doesn't work out?" I asked. "Then you'll have had an amazing experience and learned something new about yourself. But based on what I saw today, I think you have a real future in food television." The flight home gave me time to process everything that had happened. Just 6 hours earlier, I'd been terrified about cooking on camera. Now I felt energized and excited about the possibility of reaching more people with my approach to accessible cooking. David met me at the airport, eager to hear every detail of the experience. "How did it go?" he asked as soon as I emerged from the gate. "I think it went well," I said, still hardly believing it myself. I actually enjoyed it once I got started. Teaching cooking on camera felt natural. And they want to film a pilot episode next month. David swept me into a hug right there in the airport terminal, both of us laughing with relief and excitement. "I'm so proud of you," he said. "You've worked so hard to get here." That evening, the whole family gathered in the kitchen to hear about my day. Sophia and Lucas peppered me with questions about the cameras and the other people involved, while Patricia listened with the satisfied expression of someone whose faith had been validated. "When will you know if they want to make a whole show?" Sophia asked. "It depends on how the pilot episode goes and how people respond to it," I explained. "This is all new territory for me." "Mom," Lucas said seriously, "does this mean you're going to be famous?" The question made me laugh. "I don't know about famous, but if this works out, it means I'll get to help more people feel confident about cooking. That's what really matters to me." 2 weeks later, Michael called with the official green light for the pilot episode. "We've scheduled filming for the first week of next month," he said. "Are you ready to change some lives through cooking?" I As I hung up the phone and looked around my kitchen, the same space that had once been a source of stress and failure, I felt a profound sense of gratitude for the journey that had brought me to this moment. Every burned dinner, every frustrated attempt at Patricia's recipes, every moment of feeling inadequate had been necessary preparation for this opportunity. I was about to find out if my approach to cooking could translate into television success, if my story of transformation would resonate with audiences beyond my blog readers. But regardless of what happened next, I'd already accomplished something I never thought possible. I'd found my own way in the kitchen, and now I had the chance to help others find theirs. The pilot episode filming began on a crisp October morning in Los Angeles, 3 months after my initial screen test. Food Network had rented a beautiful kitchen space that looked like something from a magazine, all gleaming surfaces and professional equipment that I'd only dreamed of using. Despite my growing confidence, walking into that space filled me with the familiar flutter of nerves I'd learned to channel into focus rather than panic. Michael Thompson greeted me with the same warm enthusiasm he'd shown during our first phone call, but now there were cameras, lighting technicians, and a full production crew bustling around the kitchen. The reality of television production was more complex and overwhelming than I'd anticipated, but also more exciting. Today, we're going to showcase your teaching style with 3 home cooks who volunteered to learn your techniques, Michael explained as makeup artists worked to prepare me for the cameras. They've all read your blog and are eager to work with you, but they represent different skill levels and cooking challenges. The 3 participants were perfect representations of my blog audience. Carmen was a working mother of 2 who loved traditional Mexican food, but struggled to find time for elaborate preparation. Jennifer was a newlywed who felt intimidated by her husband's family recipes and wanted to contribute more confidently to family gatherings. And Robert was a retired teacher who had recently developed an interest in cooking, but found most recipes either too simplified or impossibly complex. "I've been following your blog for 8 months, Carmen told me during our initial meeting. Your modified pozole recipe saved my sanity during the holidays. Instead of spending all day in the kitchen, I could actually enjoy time with my family." "That's exactly why I started adapting these recipes," I said, feeling the familiar warmth that came from connecting with someone who understood my journey. Traditional methods are beautiful, but they shouldn't be barriers to enjoying good food with the people we love. The filming began with me demonstrating my approach to mole, the recipe that had become my signature technique. As I explained my shortcuts and innovations to the camera, I felt completely natural and confident. This was the same teaching I'd been doing through my blog, just with a wider audience and professional equipment. The key to accessible mole is understanding that complexity of flavor doesn't require complexity of method, I explained, showing how my modified technique produced rich, authentic results in half the traditional time. "We're not taking shortcuts with taste, we're taking shortcuts with process." Carmen jumped in immediately, eager to try the technique herself. "I've always been scared of mole because my mother-in-law makes it look so difficult," she said, as I guided her through toasting the chilies. "But this actually makes sense." "That's the point," I said, adjusting her technique slightly. "Cooking should make sense. When we understand why we're doing something, we can adapt it to work better for our lives." Jennifer was more hesitant, her movements careful and uncertain. "What if I mess it up?" she asked, echoing the same fears I'd carried for years. "Then we'll figure out how to fix it," I said simply. "Mistakes are how we learn. I've probably made every possible mole mistake at least twice." As we worked together, I found myself naturally adapting my teaching style to each person's needs and learning preferences. With Carmen, I focused on efficiency and time-saving techniques that would work in her busy schedule. With Jennifer, I emphasized building confidence through understanding the reasoning behind each step. With Robert, I explained the science behind the cooking methods, appealing to his analytical nature. "You're a natural teacher," the director whispered to Michael during a break between scenes. "She makes everyone feel capable without dumbing anything down." The second day of filming focused on tamale making, featuring my assembly line approach that had transformed a traditionally time-intensive process into something manageable for contemporary home cooks. I demonstrated my tool adaptations, showed how to set up an efficient workspace, and guided the participants through creating perfectly formed tamales. "I can't believe how much easier this is with the right tools," Robert said, using my offset spatula technique to spread masa evenly across corn husks. "Why doesn't anyone else teach it this way?" "Because everyone assumes there's only one right way to do things," I said. "But innovation doesn't have to mean abandoning tradition. It can mean making tradition more accessible." As the participants worked, I found myself thinking about Patricia and how much my relationship with cooking had changed since those early disastrous lessons in her kitchen. The techniques I was teaching honored everything she'd taught me about flavor and authenticity, while adapting the methods to work for people with different skills and time constraints. "This feels like real cooking," Jennifer said with obvious pride as she examined her finished tamales. "Not just following a recipe, but actually understanding what I'm doing." That comment captured exactly what I'd hoped to achieve. I wanted people to feel empowered in their kitchens, to understand that there were multiple paths to delicious results, and that their own approaches and adaptations could be just as valid as traditional methods. The filming wrapped with a segment where all three participants cooked independently, applying the techniques I'd taught them to create their own versions of the recipes. Watching them work with confidence and creativity, making small modifications based on their personal preferences and dietary needs, filled me with a sense of accomplishment I'd never experienced in my marketing career. "That was incredible," Michael said as the cameras stopped rolling. "You have a gift for making people feel capable. That's exactly what food television needs right now." 3 weeks later, Michael called with news about the pilot's reception. "The network executives loved it," he said, his excitement evident even over the phone. "They want to move forward with a full season, 13 episodes, your own show, complete creative control over the content." My own show. The words felt surreal, like someone else's life rather than my own. Just 2 years earlier, I'd been hiding store-bought food in my own serving dishes, terrified that my mother-in-law would discover my culinary inadequacies. Now Food Network wanted to give me a platform to teach cooking to a national audience. "What would the show be called?" I asked, still processing the magnitude of the opportunity. "We want to keep the concept simple and clear," Michael said. "Your Way Home with Jessica Martinez. The focus will be on showing people that there are multiple paths to great cooking, that they can adapt traditional recipes to fit their lives without sacrificing authenticity or flavor." The announcement of the show created a whirlwind of activity that transformed every aspect of my life. Food Network's publicity department arranged interviews with cooking magazines, newspaper food sections, and popular blogs. My own blog readership exploded as news of the television show spread through social media. "I can't believe my mom is going to be on Food Network," Sophia told her friends, a mixture of pride and amazement in her voice. "She used to burn everything, and now she's teaching people how to cook on TV." "That's kind of the point," I explained, during one of our family dinners. "The show isn't about being perfect. It's about showing people that you can learn and grow and find your own way to create great food." Lucas, now 14 and more interested in cooking than ever, had a different perspective. "It's cool that you're going to be famous, but mostly, I'm proud that you figured out how to do something you were scared of." His observation touched on something profound about my journey. The show represented more than professional success or public recognition. It was validation that struggle and persistence could lead to unexpected destinations, that the very challenges that had made me feel inadequate could become the foundation for helping others. Patricia's reaction to the show announcement was everything I could have hoped for and more. She invited the entire extended family to her house for a celebration dinner, preparing all my favorite dishes and presenting me with a gift that brought tears to my eyes. "This belonged to my grandmother," she said, handing me a wooden spoon worn smooth by decades of use. She brought it from Mexico when she came to this country. It's been waiting for the right person to carry on the tradition. "Patricia, I can't accept this," I protested, overwhelmed by the significance of the gesture. "This should stay in your family." "Mija, you are family," she said firmly. "And more than that, you found a way to honor our traditions while making them accessible to people who might never have discovered them otherwise. That's exactly what this spoon is meant for." The weight of the wooden spoon in my hands felt like receiving a blessing, acknowledgement that my approach to cooking was not just acceptable, but valuable. The woman who had once patiently endured my kitchen disasters now saw me as worthy of carrying forward culinary traditions that had been passed down through generations. "I have something to tell everyone," I said, standing up at the crowded dinner table. "The show has been picked up for a full season, 13 episodes that will air starting next spring." The eruption of cheers and congratulations from David's family filled Patricia's dining room with joy and pride. These were the same people who had once politely suffered through my cooking attempts, who had diplomatically praised store-bought contributions to family gatherings, who had watched me struggle for years to master basic techniques. "What's the first episode going to be about?" asked Rebecca, her own culinary confidence now seeming less intimidating and more inspiring. "I want to start with the story of learning to make your pozole," I said, looking at Patricia. "How a recipe that seemed impossible became the foundation for everything else I learned about cooking." "And you'll tell them about burning it the first 6 times?" Patricia asked with a mischievous smile. "Especially that part," I laughed. "The failures are just as important as the successes." The months leading up to filming the full season were filled with recipe development, location scouting, and detailed planning for each episode. Food Network wanted to showcase not just my teaching techniques, but also the stories behind them, the journey from kitchen disaster to confident home cook that had led to my unique approach. "We want viewers to see themselves in your story," explained Sarah Chen, the show's producer who had been assigned to work with me on content development. "You represent every home cook who's ever felt intimidated by traditional recipes or family expectations." Each episode would feature me working with different groups of home cooks, teaching techniques that addressed common cooking challenges while sharing the personal experiences that had led me to develop these methods. The show would film in real home kitchens rather than studio spaces, emphasizing the practical, accessible nature of my approach. "Episode 3 will be filmed in your own kitchen," Sarah told me during one of our planning sessions. "We want to show viewers the space where you developed these techniques, the normal home kitchen where all this innovation happened." The thought of filming in my own kitchen, the space that had been the site of so many disasters and eventual triumphs, felt like completing a circle. The same countertops where I'd cried over burned dinners would now be the backdrop for teaching others how to avoid the same frustrations. David took a leave of absence from the family construction business to support the show's production, handling logistics and scheduling while I focused on content creation and filming. His pride in my success was evident in everything he did, from managing interview requests to helping test new recipe modifications. "I knew you were capable of amazing things," he told me one evening as we reviewed scripts for upcoming episodes. "But I never imagined it would happen through cooking. You've turned your biggest challenge into your greatest strength." The filming process itself was both exhausting and exhilarating. Each episode required 2 full days of shooting, with multiple takes and angles for every technique demonstration. But working with the home cooks who volunteered to appear on the show never felt like work. Their enthusiasm and gratitude reminded me daily why this opportunity mattered beyond personal success. "You've given me permission to cook my own way," said Margaret, a 70-year-old grandmother who appeared in the episode about adapting traditional recipes for dietary restrictions. "I've been diabetic for 10 years and thought I'd never be able to make my family's favorite dishes again. Your modifications let me stay connected to my heritage while taking care of my health." Stories like Margaret's reinforced my belief that cooking should be inclusive and adaptable rather than rigid and exclusionary. The techniques I'd developed weren't just shortcuts or conveniences. They were pathways to keeping culinary traditions alive for people whose circumstances might otherwise exclude them from participating. The show's premiere was scheduled for a Tuesday evening in March, with Food Network planning a significant promotional campaign around the launch. They arranged viewing parties in cities across the country, partnered with cooking stores for demonstrations, and featured my story in their spring programming announcements. "Are you nervous about the premiere?" Amanda asked during our weekly coffee date, now a cherished constant in my increasingly hectic schedule. "Terrified," I admitted. "What if people hate it? What if I come across as arrogant or unprofessional? What if my approach offends traditionalists who think I'm disrespecting their heritage? Or what if you help thousands of people feel more confident in their kitchens?" Amanda countered. "What if you inspire a new generation of home cooks who thought traditional foods were beyond their reach? What if you change the way people think about adapting recipes to fit modern life?" The night before the premiere, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed thinking about the journey that had brought me to this moment, from the woman who couldn't make rice without burning it to someone with her own cooking show on a major television network. The transformation felt so complete and so unlikely that I sometimes wondered if it was all an elaborate dream. David found me in the kitchen at 3 in the morning, sitting at the island where I'd spent so many hours practicing techniques and developing recipes. "Second thoughts?" he asked, settling onto the stool beside me. "More like disbelief," I said. 2 years ago, I was pretending that bakery flan was homemade. Tomorrow night, millions of people are going to watch me teach cooking on television. "And you're going to be amazing," he said with absolute conviction. "You've already changed so many lives through your blog. The show is just going to multiply that impact." The premiere viewing party was held at Patricia's house naturally, with the entire extended family gathered around her big screen television. Food Network had sent flowers and champagne, along with a personalized note thanking me for bringing authentic, accessible cooking to their network. As the opening credits rolled and my face appeared on screen, the room erupted in cheers and applause. Seeing myself on television felt surreal, but watching my family's reactions filled me with overwhelming gratitude for their support throughout this unlikely journey. The first episode showcased my approach to mole making, featuring the 3 participants from the pilot along with additional home cooks who had volunteered to share their stories. The editing was masterful, capturing both the technical aspects of my teaching and the emotional transformation that occurred when people realized they could create something they'd always considered beyond their abilities. "Look at their faces," Sophia said during the segment where participants tasted their finished mole for the first time. "They look exactly like you did when you finally made good pozole." She was right. The expression of amazement and pride on their faces mirrored my own journey from frustration to confidence. Seeing it reflected back through the television screen reinforced why this work mattered so much to me. The episode concluded with me in my own kitchen, sharing the wooden spoon Patricia had given me, and explaining its significance as a symbol of tradition and innovation working together rather than in opposition. "Cooking is about connection," I said to the camera, holding the worn wooden spoon. "Connection to our heritage, to our families, and to the people we feed. When we adapt recipes to fit our lives, we're not abandoning tradition. We're ensuring it survives and thrives for future generations." The response to the premiere exceeded everyone's expectations. Social media erupted with positive comments from viewers who felt seen and encouraged by my approach. The Food Network website crashed temporarily due to traffic from people seeking the recipes featured in the episode. "I've been following your blog for months, but seeing you teach on TV was even better," wrote one viewer. "You make everything seem possible. I'm going to try making mole for the first time this weekend." "Thank you for showing that there's no shame in adapting recipes," commented another. "I felt guilty for years about modifying my grandmother's dishes, but you've helped me understand that evolution is part of tradition." The reviews from food critics and industry professionals were equally positive, praising both my teaching style and the show's fresh approach to traditional cooking. Instruction. Martinez brings authenticity and innovation together in ways that feel natural rather than forced, wrote a reviewer for Food and Wine magazine. Her background as a struggling home cook gives her credibility that celebrity chefs often lack. This show will resonate with anyone who's ever felt intimidated by their own kitchen. The success of the premiere led to immediate discussions about expanding the show's reach. Food Network wanted to extend the season, develop companion cookbooks, and explore opportunities for live cooking demonstrations and workshops. The response has been phenomenal, Michael told me during a call the week after the premiere. We're already getting requests for more episodes, and the network is talking about making this a flagship program. But the most meaningful response came from closer to home. The morning after the premiere, I found a handwritten note from Patricia slipped under my front door. Mija, watching you on television last night filled my heart with joy. You have found a way to honor our traditions while making them accessible to everyone. Your grandmother would be proud, and so am I. Thank you for showing the world that there are many ways to cook with love. The note was signed with a recipe for her secret salsa verde, the one she'd never shared with anyone outside the immediate family. Written in her careful handwriting were ingredients and techniques passed down through 4 generations, now entrusted to me as recognition of my place in the family's culinary legacy. The success of Your Way Home continued to build throughout the season. Each episode attracted larger audiences and generated more engagement on social media. My blog readership multiplied exponentially, with comments pouring in from viewers who had tried my techniques and found success in their own kitchens. I made your modified tamales for my husband's birthday, and even his grandmother complimented them, wrote Maria from San Antonio. She said they were different but delicious, and asked me to teach her my method. Your show helped me realize that being a good cook doesn't mean copying someone else exactly, shared Jennifer from Chicago. I've started experimenting with my own modifications, and my family loves the results. The impact extended beyond individual success stories to broader conversations about tradition, innovation, and accessibility in cooking. Food magazines featured articles about adapting family recipes for modern life. Cooking schools began incorporating my techniques into their curricula, and other food bloggers started sharing their own approaches to making traditional foods more approachable. You've started a movement, Sarah observed during production meetings for the second season, which Food Network had eagerly greenlit. People are talking about cooking differently because of your show. The second season expanded the concept to include techniques from other cuisines, always with the same focus on accessibility and adaptation. I worked with Italian grandmothers to simplify pasta making, learned from Korean home cooks about streamlining kimchi preparation, and explored ways to make French pastry techniques more approachable for casual bakers. The beautiful thing about your approach, explained Chef Maria Gonzalez, a James Beard Award winner who appeared as a guest on the Italian episodes, is that you respect the essence of dishes while acknowledging that people's lives and kitchens are different now than they were generations ago. Each guest appearance and collaboration reinforced my belief that innovation and tradition could coexist harmoniously. The most accomplished chefs and home cooks understood that adaptation was necessary for culinary traditions to remain relevant and accessible. By the end of the second season, Your Way Home had become one of Food Network's most popular programs. The show won a James Beard Media Award for Best Television Program, and I was invited to speak at food conferences and culinary schools across the country. 5 years ago, I couldn't make rice without burning it, I told the audience at a food writing conference in New York. Today, I have the privilege of teaching cooking to millions of people through television. The journey between those 2 points taught me that our greatest struggles often prepare us for our most meaningful contributions. The speaking engagements led to a book deal with a major publisher who wanted to compile my television recipes, along with the personal stories behind my techniques. The modern Mexican kitchen, finding your own way to traditional flavors, became a bestseller within weeks of publication, further expanding the reach of my message about accessible, authentic cooking. Your book gave me permission to modify my mother's recipes for my dietary restrictions, wrote one reader. I thought I was being disrespectful, but you helped me understand that adaptation can be a form of love. The success brought opportunities I never could have imagined when I was struggling to make edible enchiladas in my own kitchen. Restaurant partnerships, product endorsements, speaking engagements at food festivals, and invitations to judge cooking competitions filled my calendar with activities that would have seemed impossible just a few years earlier. But the most satisfying aspect of this success was watching how it changed my family's relationship with cooking. Sophia had become an accomplished home cook who combined traditional techniques with modern innovations, often developing her own modifications that she shared. On the blog I'd started for the family, Lucas had discovered a passion for baking and was considering culinary school after high school graduation. "You've shown us that there's no shame in learning and growing," Sophia told me during one of our collaborative cooking sessions. "Even when you were struggling the most, you never gave up. That's what I want to remember about cooking and everything else." David had returned to the family business but remained actively involved in supporting my career. His pride in my transformation was evident in everything from the way he talked about the show to his enthusiasm for trying new recipes I developed. "I fell in love with a brilliant, determined woman," he said during an interview for a food magazine profile. "Watching her apply those qualities to cooking and then share her discoveries with the world has been incredible. She's the same person I married, just more confident and fulfilled." The third season of Your Way Home launched with even greater anticipation and success. Food Network had given me complete creative control, allowing me to explore more complex topics like cooking for different generations in the same household, adapting recipes for various dietary needs, and preserving family food traditions in immigrant communities. "This show has become bigger than teaching cooking techniques," observed a television critic for the Los Angeles Times. "Martinez has created a platform for discussing how food connects us to our heritage while adapting to contemporary realities. It's cultural preservation through practical innovation." The recognition felt overwhelming at times, but it was grounded in the daily reality of connecting with home cooks who were finding confidence and joy in their kitchens because of techniques I'd developed during my own struggles. Every success story reminded me why this work mattered beyond personal achievement. "I never thought I'd be able to make my grandmother's pozole, but your method made it possible," wrote Carmen, one of the participants from the pilot episode who had become a regular correspondent. "Now my daughter is learning to make it too, with her own modifications. The tradition continues, just with some evolution." 5 years after the show's premiere, as I stood in the Food Network kitchen filming what would become the 100th episode of Your Way Home, I reflected on the unlikely journey that had brought me to this moment. The same hands that had once fumbled with corn husks and burned simple rice were now demonstrating techniques to millions of viewers with confidence and expertise. Patricia, now in her 70s but still sharp and enthusiastic, had become a regular guest on the show, representing the traditional knowledge that formed the foundation for my innovations. Our on-screen collaboration perfectly illustrated the show's central message about respecting tradition while embracing adaptation. "Mija, do you remember the first time you tried to make my enchiladas?" she asked during a segment we were filming. About building confidence in the kitchen. "How could I forget?" I laughed, looking directly into the camera. "They were inedible. I was so embarrassed I wanted to quit trying." "But you didn't quit," Patricia said with pride. "You found your own way to make them, and now you're teaching thousands of people that there's no shame in learning through trial and error." The conversation encapsulated everything the show had come to represent: permission to struggle, encouragement to adapt, and celebration of the many paths that could lead to delicious, meaningful food. The kitchen disasters that had once filled Me with shame had become the foundation for helping others navigate their own culinary challenges. As the cameras stopped rolling on that 100th episode, surrounded by my family and the crew who had become like family, I felt a profound sense of gratitude for the unexpected direction my life had taken. The woman who had once hidden store-bought food in her own serving dishes now had a platform to encourage authenticity and experimentation in kitchens across the country. "Mom, you know what's really amazing about all this?" Sophia said as we cleaned up after filming. "You didn't become successful by becoming someone else. You became successful by becoming more yourself." Her observation captured the essence of my journey better than any professional review or industry award ever could. The cooking show, the cookbook, the recognition, and the platform were all meaningful. But the real transformation had been internal. I'd learned to value my own perspective, to see my analytical approach as a strength rather than a limitation, and to understand that there were multiple valid ways to achieve the same delicious results. The success had also transformed my marriage, in unexpected ways. David and I had become partners in my career as well as in life, working together to manage opportunities and make decisions about the future. Our relationship had deepened through shared purpose and mutual respect for each other's contributions. "I never imagined when I married you that we'd end up in the food business," David said one evening as we reviewed proposals for new projects. "But watching you build this career from nothing has been incredible. You've shown me what's possible when someone refuses to accept limitations." The opportunities continued to expand in directions I couldn't have anticipated. Food Network wanted to develop a line of cooking tools based on my innovations. Publishers were interested in additional cookbooks focusing on different cuisines, and production companies had approached me about developing shows for streaming platforms. "The key is staying true to your core message," advised my agent during discussions about future projects. "People connect with your authenticity and your story of transformation. That's what they want more of." But even as professional opportunities multiplied, the most rewarding aspects of my success remained the personal connections with home cooks who had found confidence and joy through my techniques. The letters, emails, and social media messages that arrived daily reminded me why this work mattered beyond ratings and revenue. "I've been cooking for my family for 30 years, but your show taught me it's okay to modify recipes to fit our needs," wrote Ellen from Portland. "My kids have food allergies, and I always felt guilty about changing traditional dishes. You helped me understand that adaptation can be an act of love. Your episode about cooking with teenagers inspired me to start teaching my daughter," shared Michael from Austin. "We're working through your techniques together, and it's become our special bonding time. Thank you for showing us that cooking can bring families closer." These responses reinforced my belief that food television could be more than entertainment or instruction. It could be a vehicle for encouraging people to trust their instincts, adapt traditions to fit their circumstances, and find confidence in their own abilities. The 7th season of Your Way Home featured an episode filmed in Patricia's kitchen, celebrating the traditional techniques that had inspired my innovations while showcasing how different approaches could coexist harmoniously. 3 generations of Martinez women appeared together, demonstrating how cooking knowledge had evolved and adapted while maintaining its essential spirit. "This is what tradition really looks like," I said to the camera as Patricia, Sophia, and I worked side by side preparing tamales using 3 different techniques. Not rigid adherence to a single method, but a living, breathing practice that grows and changes while honoring its roots. The episode became one of the most popular in the show's history, generating conversations about family traditions, cultural preservation, and the role of innovation in keeping culinary heritage alive. Food historians praised it as a perfect example of how cooking traditions actually evolve in real families over time. "Martinez has created something unique in food television," wrote a critic for Bon Appetit magazine. "She's shown that respecting tradition and embracing innovation aren't contradictory goals. They're complementary approaches that can strengthen each other when applied thoughtfully." as I prepared for what would be the final season of Your Way Home. I reflected on how completely my relationship with cooking had transformed. The kitchen that had once been a source of stress and inadequacy had become my creative laboratory and professional studio. The family recipes that had once seemed impossibly complex now felt like familiar friends that I could adapt and modify with confidence. The announcement that I would be stepping back from regular television production to focus on other projects generated an outpouring of gratitude from viewers whose lives had been changed by the show. The network planned a special retrospective episode featuring participants from all 7 seasons, showcasing the long-term impact of the techniques and philosophy I'd shared. "You gave me permission to be imperfect in my kitchen," said Carmen, during filming for the retrospective. "Before your show, I thought good cooking meant following recipes exactly. Now I understand that the best cooking comes from understanding ingredients and techniques well enough to make them your own." The final episode of Your Way Home aired on a Tuesday evening in November, 7 years after the premiere that had launched my unexpected career in food television. The episode featured me cooking in my own kitchen with my family, preparing dishes that represented the journey from kitchen disaster to confident home cook. When I started this show, I wanted to help people feel less intimidated by cooking, I said to the camera as the episode concluded. What I learned along the way is that confidence comes not from perfection, but from understanding that there are many ways to achieve delicious results. Trust your instincts, adapt recipes to fit your life, and remember that the best cooking always comes from the heart. The show's conclusion marked the end of one chapter, but the beginning of many others. The cookbook series had expanded to include techniques from multiple cuisines. The cooking tools line had become a bestseller, and speaking engagements at culinary schools and food conferences kept me connected to the evolving conversation about tradition and innovation in cooking. More importantly, the platform I'd built through television allowed me to continue supporting home cooks who were finding their own paths through culinary challenges. The foundation I'd established provided scholarships for cooking education, funded community kitchen programs in underserved areas, and supported research into making traditional foods more accessible for people with dietary restrictions. "You've created a legacy that goes far beyond television," Michael Thompson told me during our final production meeting. "You've changed how people think about cooking, tradition, and their own capabilities in the kitchen." 10 years after burning. That first batch of enchiladas in my smoky kitchen, I stood in the same space preparing dinner for my family with easy confidence and genuine joy. The transformation felt complete, but not finished, a foundation for whatever opportunities might emerge next. Sophia, now in college studying food science and business, had announced her intention to develop her own approach to accessible cooking, building on the foundation I'd created while addressing the unique challenges faced by her generation. Lucas had decided to pursue culinary education, inspired by watching how cooking could become a vehicle for helping others. "You've shown us that it's possible to honor tradition while making it relevant for contemporary life," Sophia said during one of her visits home. "That's what I want to do too, just with my own perspective and innovations." David and I had begun discussing plans for our own restaurant, a casual concept that would showcase approachable versions of traditional dishes alongside contemporary innovations. The space would include a teaching kitchen where we could offer hands-on classes for home cooks who wanted to develop their skills in a supportive environment. "It feels like everything has come full circle," David observed as we toured potential restaurant locations. "From struggling to cook for our family to potentially feeding hundreds of people every week. It's an incredible journey." Patricia, now a proud grandmother and occasional cookbook collaborator, had become one of my closest advisors on new projects. Her blessing on my approach to traditional cooking had opened doors throughout the Latino culinary community, leading to collaborations and friendships I treasured beyond their professional value. "Mija, you have given these traditions new life," she told me during a recent family dinner. My grandmother would be amazed to see how far her recipes have traveled, and how many people they've touched. As I looked around the table at my family, gathered once again for one of Patricia's legendary meals, I felt overwhelming gratitude for the journey that had brought us all to this moment. The kitchen disasters that had once filled me with shame had become the foundation for a career devoted to helping others find confidence and joy in cooking. The burned dinners, the failed attempts at family recipes, the years of feeling inadequate compared to other Martinez women had all been necessary preparation for understanding how to help others navigate similar challenges. My struggles had become my greatest professional asset, proof that transformation was possible and that there were multiple paths to culinary success. The Food Network show had ended, but its impact continued through the thousands of home cooks who had found confidence through my techniques, the families who had bonded over adapted recipes, and the food traditions that had been preserved and evolved through accessible innovations. You know what the best part of this whole experience has been? I asked my family as we shared dessert, a flan I'd made using my own modified technique that honored Patricia's traditional method while accommodating my time constraints. "What's that?" Sophia asked. Learning that our biggest challenges often prepare us for our most meaningful contributions. The kitchen disasters that made me feel like a failure actually taught me everything I needed to know about helping others succeed. As laughter filled Patricia's dining room and the familiar warmth of family surrounded me, I realized that the greatest transformation hadn't been becoming a television personality or best-selling cookbook author. It had been learning to value my own perspective, to see my different approach as a strength rather than a weakness, and to understand that there were infinite ways to create love and connection through food. The woman who had once hidden store-bought flan in her own serving dishes now had the confidence to serve her own modified version to the family matriarch who had inspired it. The journey from kitchen disaster to culinary confidence had taken longer than I'd hoped, but had led to destinations I never could have imagined, and in the end, that was the most important lesson of all. Sometimes our greatest struggles don't just prepare us for success. They become the foundation for helping others transform their own challenges into strengths. The burned dinners and failed recipes that had once filled me with shame had become the source of my greatest pride, proof that growth and adaptation were not just possible, but necessary for keeping traditions alive. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.